and I'm going to start interpretation. Which I might need to stop sharing for. All right. Great. So everyone's microphones are turned off to start. You will need to unmute to speak. If you're joining via phone, you can press *6 to unmute. You can also use non-verbal feedback options, so you can raise your hand or leave a message in the chat if you have a question. And again, if you called into the meeting by phone, you can use *9 to raise your hand. And a little meeting norm is that if you see the turtle emoji, that's a request from our interpreters to slow down a little bit. So our agenda for tonight, we're going to do a brief presentation about the Bluebikes expansion project for this phase. Then we'll have time for Q&A, and then we'll divide up into breakout rooms so that you can review sites for each neighborhood. Each breakout room will be a separate neighborhood, and you'll have time to cycle through each one if you'd like. All right, Kim, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, thank you, Louisa. So hello, everyone. My name is Kim Foltz. I'm the director of Boston Bikes. We are a small team within the Streets Cabinet that's responsible for our bike share system, among other things. So Louisa and I are going to kind of tag team on this presentation tonight. So what our objectives tonight are just to, first of all, provide a little bit of background about our public bike share system and the need for expansion. We want to share the potential sites that we've identified with all of you. So that's what we'll do in the breakout groups. And really the primary purpose in this open house is to be gathering your input on what sites would be the best for the neighborhood or neighborhoods. So just a little bit of background about our bike share system. Bluebikes operates in 13 municipalities in the Metro Boston area. We're closing in on 600 stations total. Over half of those are in the city of Boston. We've got about 5,600 bikes, and 750 or so of those are e-bikes. Bluebikes is publicly owned. We really think about Bluebikes as public transportation by bike. So each one of the municipalities and we each one of us owns our own equipment and the stations and the bikes. We have contracts with a company called Lyft as our operator, and Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts is our title sponsor. So that's why the bikes are blue, and that's why the name is what it is. So they provide a lot of support to keep the system running. So one thing that we always like to share is that it's been a priority for our system, and particularly for the city of Boston, since the beginning of bike share, to make sure that we're reducing barriers to the system. There's lots of different kinds of barriers, but we know one of those is price. We've had a long time income eligible pass option for residents. System-wide, the current discount for people who meet income guidelines is $50 a year or $5 a month. And then within the city of Boston, the city subsidizes memberships even further for income eligible residents. So that pass is just $5 a year for anyone who's on any kind of public assistance or would have an income that would qualify them for that public assistance. We also provide a $60 a year membership for people who are new to bike share in Boston. So residents who haven't had a membership in the last 3 years, but would like to give it a try. And we're happy to share more information about those programs if any of you would like to sign up. So there are millions of trips taken on bike share every year, about 5 million, or close to 5 million last year in 2024. And over half of those were taken on Bluebikes in the city of Boston. About 11% of those trips started in Dorchester, JP, Mattapan, or Roxbury. So the neighborhoods that we're talking about here tonight. So just to give a little bit of perspective on this section of the city relative to the system as a whole. We've worked really hard in the city of Boston over the last 7 or 8 years to make some pretty significant improvements to the reach of our system. We released a long-term transportation plan in 2017, Go Boston 2030, and among a lot of goals in that plan was making sure that bike share is within a 10-minute walk of every household in Boston. This map here on the right is what the bike share system looked like in 2017. So you could draw a line kind of right down the middle of the city, and the southern half of the city basically had no bike share. So since then, we've done a lot of work. We do have bike share in every neighborhood in the city of Boston. We're around 90% of households that are within that 10-minute walk. So we've really made a lot of progress, and we're very proud of that. But we know we have a lot further to go still, just because we're getting close to having that 100% of households within a 10-minute walk. We know that there are a lot of pain points, and that a more ideal walk zone is more like 3 or 5 minutes. So when we were tasked with adding these 100 stations across the city, Louisa and I had to do a lot of work to really think about, okay, how should we distribute these across the entire city of Boston? And to start off, we kind of grouped stations and the need for expansion into 2 different kinds of areas. So one, we think about infill stations. So those are really, how do we enhance the service in the high demand areas? Think about downtown or Back Bay or Seaport, where we're just we have a really hard time keeping up with the demand. There's tremendous number of trips that come and go, and people are often finding bikes not available or docks not available. So that's really filling in, small gaps in the existing network. And then we also think about expansion stations. So how do we get closer to that 100%, but also really how do we strengthen the edges of the current network so that bike share is really a convenient and reliable option for people regardless of where you might be in the city. So we did a whole lot of work together with our analytics team to analyze the need for bike share. So one of the things, or 2 of the things that we looked at, was population and job density. We know that both of these have a lot to do with the number of trips that come and go. So, just to give you a sense of what that looks like in Dorchester, one of the neighborhoods that we're talking about here tonight. This is a map of job and population density, and in JP and Roxbury, and in Mattapan. Another metric for us that's important, both in terms of analyzing the need and thinking about where we need to have stations, but also just in managing the system, is a metric that we call rideability. So it's a metric of the availability of bikes and docks. We seem to be having a fire alarm here. We'll carry on, Louisa. Tell me if you hear that we actually have to leave. So rideability is a metric of bikes and docks and whether or not they're available. Our operator is required to keep the system rideable. So that's when both bikes and docks are available 93% of the time. That's averaged across all stations in Boston every month. So looking specifically at the neighborhoods that we're focused on here today, when we look at the rideability, August is one of our busiest months. In August in Dorchester, 2/3 of the stations were below that city standard, that 93% available. And there were 4 stations that were rideable less than 60% of the time. And here's what JP and Roxbury looked like. So 2/3 of stations in JP and Roxbury were below the city standard for rideability.
Hold on one moment. I just need to
Yeah,
confirm that we don't need to evacuate. One moment.
we are in City Hall and seems to be a fire alarm going on, and now, yeah, maybe we'll pause for a minute.
And for those who've just joined us, there's a fire alarm going off in City Hall where the presenters are located, so they're just checking to make sure that they don't have to evacuate. So we're taking a quick pause. Thanks for your patience.
Apologies, everyone. This is a new one in 12 years of working for the city and running public meetings. I never had this one. For now, we think we can carry on without having to evacuate. Anyway, we were discussing rideability, so the measure of bike and dock availability. And this is, as you've had lots of time to study this slide, what is looked like rideability looked like in JP and Roxbury. And again, we see stations that are definitely well below the standard. So to us, it's an indicator that there are some pain points in these neighborhoods. You'll notice, just to be, upfront here, the Mattapan, we're not sharing rideability data. Mattapan turns out to not have those same kind of pain points. But another critical thing is the walking distance. Now, I mentioned before our long-term transportation plan, the goal of having every household within a 10-minute walk of bike share. If you've ever had to walk 10 minutes to get to, say a train station or a bus station, or your car, if your car is parked far away from where you are, it's, less than ideal. And we know from a lot of experience running bike share ourselves and research in other cities that when you reduce that walk distance to more like a quarter mile or like a 3-minute or 5-minute walk, that it becomes much more convenient for people. So we are looking to, whenever we can, sort of reduce that walking distance. So these two maps here show Dorchester. The dark red is parcels that are more than a 5-minute walk to bike share station, and then the lighter red is more than a 3-minute walk. So we're looking to reduce that dark red, especially. If we were to install all of the stations which we've proposed for Dorchester, which we will not be, but if we were to, this is the map on the right, is what that would look like. And here is a similar map for JP and Roxbury. So again, The map on the right is if we were to install all of the proposed stations, how that improves that 3 or 5 minute walk zone. And here's what it looks like for Mattapan. So I'll pass it off to Louisa now to share a little bit more about how we're planning out the sites themselves.
Thanks, Kim, and also huge kudos for keeping your thoughts together during the fire alarm. So we are doing this 100 station expansion in phases. So we actually started in what we're calling phase 1 in the fall of 2023 when there was that month-long red line shutdown. We moved really quickly. We installed 8 new stations in Dorchester and Mattapan to support people during that shutdown. And then we kind of kicked off the community engagement process in phases 2 and 3. We were focused on downtown, South Boston, Charlestown, and East Boston, and we installed 55 new stations. Now we're in phase 4. We're aiming to add up to 20 new stations across these 4 neighborhoods, and then we'll wrap up the project. We'll probably kick off community engagement in January for the West Roxbury, Rosendale, Hyde Park, and Back Bay. So we launched community engagement for this phase early last month, and we'll wrap it up actually at the end of this coming weekend. And then we're aiming to start installation in January. So we're aiming to install 2 to 4 new stations in Dorchester, 2 to 4 in JP, 2 to 5 in Mattapan, and 3 to 7 in Roxbury. And what has community engagement looked like for this phase? So we've had 4 open houses. This is our 4th. And we also launched online surveys in early September. So, we've gotten a lot of responses on those. We also posted signs at all of the potential sites that direct people to the surveys and the webpage. And we've also been flyering around the 4 neighborhoods. So after community engagement wraps up at the end, Monday morning when I close the surveys, we're going to consider all the comments we've received. So that's comments that you all share with us tonight, comments we've gotten by email, by phone, by 311, through all the surveys. And we'll use those to help narrow down the list of sites that we actually want to install. And then we will finalize the locations and begin to secure permits, which can take some time. So we wanted to share a little bit more about what makes a good site for a bike share station and what kind of went into how we chose these potential sites. So good bike share station sites are visible. This example is right in front of Copley Library, so we don't want them to be like tucked away or hidden. We want people walking and biking and driving by to be able to see them. They need to be clear of utilities, so anything like a manhole or a handhole cannot be located under the base plates. They need to be able to be serviced by the Bluebikes vans. So that's, if the station needs repair or if they're rebalancing bikes, like bringing bikes to an empty station. They also need to leave room for pedestrians. So if a station's on the sidewalk, we have design requirements around how much space is left clear for people walking. And I'm gonna attempt to keep talking and let Kim let me know if there's something more serious. So we also need stations to be sunny. So there's either like solar panels on the computer, on the kiosk, or on the docks. And ideally those would get at least 4 hours of direct sunlight a day. And then we want stations to be where people want to go. So we can put stations on the sidewalk, on plazas. When we do that, we need to make sure there's enough space for people walking to get by. And also if there's curbside parking or any like curbside use, pickup, drop off, we need to make sure that there's enough space between the station and the car for people to get into and out of their cars. Bluebike stations can also be in the street, in the parking lane. They can either be oriented where the bikes like undock towards the curb or into the street, depending on what kind of utilities are present, or the nature of the street, like how busy it is or how wide it is. And we wanted to note that 15 dock Blue Bike station takes up about the same amount of space as 2 cars. So if you think about, how many trips, how many people can be served by 15 bikes, 2 cars, it helps you get a sense of those trade-offs. Blue Bike stations can be on private property as well. Sometimes it's really hard to tell what's public and what's private. But that certainly goes into our siting decisions. It's more difficult to site on private property. We have to execute a separate license agreement, which adds more time. It is something that we're doing all the time, but just so folks are aware of that. And then we also work really closely with other public agencies, with DCR, with the T, with MassDOT, to be adding stations on their property. And similarly, that often requires a separate process that can take a while. So that is it for our presentation. Thank you for bearing with us with our fire alarm. We have time now for Q&A as a group, so feel free to raise your virtual hand or type your question in the chat, and we can help answer that. We ask you to please be respectful, and we will end the Q&A by 6:45 so that we can go into breakout rooms and have enough time. If folks want to cycle through each of the 4 rooms, they'll be able to. You can always learn more at the website listed there. Again, you can, if you'd rather just sign off now and take the survey on your own, that feedback is weighted just as equally as feedback that we receive in the open house. So that's always an option as well. So yeah. Does anyone have any questions?
Have there been any, are there reports, or are there any data on safety issues around Blue Bike stations, like increases in, you know, you know, I can't think, I'm sorry, it's been such a long day, but just what are the statistics? Are there any changes in statistics around safety to bike riders or to pedestrians or anything like that around the Blue Bike stations?
Do you mean as a result of, like, after putting in a new station?
Right. So and that's typically how research works, right? So you look pre and post. Are there any changes in any sort of, have people gotten hit by cars when they're trying to get the Blue Bikes? Is there any change to traffic patterns or any changes to safety? I'm sorry if I'm not able to articulate. I'm just a little tired, but I think you get the gist of what I'm asking.
Yeah, sure. I just wanted to make sure that I understood the question correctly. So I, we have not done, like, I would say, a comprehensive analysis, or anything close to that kind of analysis, uh, as a result of any one station going in. I can tell you there's a lot of research Um, on the impact of, as there is an increase in biking, that it tends to improve safety overall, for people biking, and because it just there's more people biking on the road, it becomes more normalized. Drivers have to pay a little bit more attention, but the overall safety record of bike share in Boston is exceedingly good. There are remarkably few, I won't say there are no incidents, but the bike share bikes are designed to be big and heavy and not especially fast for a reason. And so, that it has tended, and this is not unique to Boston, across the country. The, you know, safety record is very high for bike share. We do pay a lot of attention to.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your patience and all the great work that you and your team are doing. Thank you.
Sure. And I was just going to add, we do pay attention to where we're putting stations. We do have some stations that are in the street, as Louisa said, and some of those the riders can undock toward the travel lane, but we only do that on streets where, or in a context that's appropriate to do so. So if there's enough space, if the traffic speeds and volumes aren't too high.
Yes, Michael.
Hi there. Sorry if I missed this. I was also affected by this fire alarm situation. But the in terms of e-bikes and how that dovetails with the expansion, how important is, access to electricity going to play in to like location selection, or is that kind of like a secondary um just like a secondary consideration when you're going through this process?
For this process of adding the 100 new stations, it is not a consideration. We
Okay.
are kind of separately considering the possibility of, or evaluating the possibility of electrifying some of our stations. It won't be the majority of them by a long shot. If we do go down that route. So the purpose of electrifying, for people who aren't aware, it would be basically hardwiring the stations so that there's the capacity to charge bikes at the stations. Currently, all of the e-bikes in our system is, as I mentioned at the beginning, we have about 750 e-bikes. So about maybe 13% of our fleet or so that are e-bikes. All of the batteries right now are just swapped by our operations crews. So they go out there and they replace the depleted batteries with fresh batteries, and then they charge at a central warehouse. So if we were to electrify stations, that would primarily be at stations that get a pretty high number of trips, so that we could, for a relatively small amount of electrification, small number of stations that are electrified, we would be able to impact a lot of the bikes in the system. So it's kind of on a separate track. We are evaluating the capacity and feasibility of electrifying stations based on proximity to other electrical things, like how easy it is to get to the electrical system. We are evaluating solar in some places. So it'll probably be a couple years until we have many electric stations, if any.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Any other questions? If not, then I will transition us into the site review portion of the meeting. So we're going to go into breakout rooms. You'll be able to choose which neighborhood you want to review. And after around 10 minutes, you'll get a reminder if you'd like to move on to a different room and neighborhood. Again, all these sites are available via the survey, but some prompting questions for you to think about. Where do you travel to and from in this neighborhood? What do you like about a site? What do you dislike about a site? What do you know about the site that we might not know? And yeah, so there'll be a breakout room for every neighborhood. I think I explained all this already. But yeah, Caleb, do you wanna start the breakout rooms? Thank you. And I'm gonna head to the Roxbury room now. But Caleb, let me know if any questions.
Absolutely. Thank you, Louisa.
I'm back. I forgot a key step. I need to stop the recording before I head to my breakout room. But I just want to make sure folks in the main room are you planning to join a breakout room? Do you have any questions?
Oh, sorry. I was just trying to join the JP one.
Okay, cool. Hey, are you all good? And hi, by the way. All right. Well, maybe Kay stepped away from her computer, but
Yes, if
I'm
they
gonna-
return, I can direct them to a. Hi,
Okay.
Kay. Are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Amazing. Do you need any type of interpretation help, or
No.
would you become amazing? Well, so if you go down to the toolbar at the bottom, there's a number of different options. One of them is labeled breakout rooms.